Welcome to Coachable Wealth, where we blend the worlds of sports and finance to bring you strategies as you navigate your wealth building journey. John, Cody, and Sean are here to help you elevate your financial advisor relationship to meet your long-term goals. Now let's get to it.
Welcome back, guys. A lot's happened in the last week here. I mean, on the sports front, just from the market standpoint, I mean, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I think we have to start out. Go Birds, and congratulations to all of us. What a run. What a season.
It was a great season. Crazy to think about how we waited so long as Eagles fans for a Super Bowl, and we got 2 in the past 7 years. Definitely cannot complain.
I know. Just pure domination on the defensive front. I mean, I never expected that outcome, because what was the point spread? A point or point and a half going into it at kickoff?
Yeah, it was pretty much just a pick 'em. The fact that it was 40-6 with 3 minutes left, and then the Chiefs scored 2 late touchdowns.
Yeah, best Eagles team I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, speaking to that though, so they started the season 2-2. People were saying they're overrated. Maybe Barkley wasn't the best signing. How do you guys compare that, or think about that compared to when we have volatility in the market, both to the upside and potentially to the downside?
I think it's just an emotional reaction that comes with things. You know, in sports, you can call it the general manager, the head coach, the owner, to bring everybody in, say, all right, people are going to say a lot of things. There's a lot of headline news out there, just like if you were investing. Take a deep breath. Nothing's going to work out exactly how it's supposed to right away. Things take a little bit of time. And sports is no different. I think people love to overreact. ESPN and CNBC, it's like the same thing. You read a headline news and you think the world is falling and you should fire the head coach, or you should go to all cash. I think everyone needs to take a deep breath on both fronts and just relax. And to quote another Philadelphia sports team, maybe trust the process a little bit.
Unfortunately, that one has not worked out too well for the Sixers. Yeah. Going back to the point, though, about there was calls earlier this season to fire Sirianni. And I think what was this his last year on his contract? He's about to get I saw rumors that he's going to get 4 years, potentially $60 million. I think he was bottom 2 highest paid NFL coach. I think he's about to go into the top 3. Obviously, he's done very well his first, 4 years as a head coach. But just that change in the single season, going from wanting to fire him to about to make him the highest paid NFL coach is crazy.
I think it does show, too, the relationship with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. It's not just one person or one thing. It takes a whole collection of things to make, I guess, greatness. Think back to last year with Sirianni. I mean, they started, 10-1, and it just kind of fell off.
Yep.
And he got all the pressure. The coordinators are gone, stuff like that. This year, I mean, they kind of retooled with veteran personnel around him. I mean, they brought in Barkley, 2 new coordinators. But I think it just kind of shows you that, hey, it's not one thing. It's a whole collection of items that kind of create that financial plan or kind of just trend that we're looking for.
That's a good point. From my experience, it feels like clients feel way more emotion when we have a market drop. So say in a single year, the market was down 10% compared to the market being up 10%. I guarantee you we have more conversations about the investments when it's down 10% compared to being up 10%. It's the same way with sports too. I don't know if it's just because you literally get news anywhere you look, on your TV, your computer, your smartphone, anywhere there's going to be headlines.
I think a lot anymore, you guys both said it, it is the rapid fire of kind of the news and the media cycle. I mean, you can turn it on and you see so many negative headlines, but you're 100% right. It comes back to, what is it called? Loss aversion, where kind of the negatives outweigh the positives most of the time. And a lot of times people will call us up and say, hey, I want to sell out of all my portfolio and go to cash, or just make those irrational decisions. And I think as certified financial planners, our job is to say, hey, kind of take a step back. What are your goals? What's your risk tolerance? Go back to the fundamentals and talk them through that. And say, hey, here's why we're at this point, and here's where we're headed into the future.
That's very similar to what the Eagles did this year. Everybody was freaking out after the first 4 games. They really did not change anything. If anything, maybe they've started to run the ball more, but obviously it was a very, very successful season with winning the Super Bowl. I think Barkley ended up having the most rushing yards ever with the combination of the regular season and the postseason. Unfortunately, he didn't get the record in the regular season, but as he said, he's fine with that. He wanted to win the Super Bowl. That was his main thing. It kind of goes back to investing. If you if you don't need 20% returns, you don't have to take on all the risk of the stock market.
Yep.
One thing that was said to me when I started my career, and it always stuck with me, it's like, if I gave you $20, but I took $1, what do you think about more, the $1 that I took from you or the $19 that you gained? I think people are just wired to always think about, like John said, the loss. And I think the news does a really good job of saying, whether it's sports, oh, the Eagles lost 2 in a row, fired Nick Sirianni, ESPN is all, Jalen Hurts is overrated, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, you turn on CNBC, oh, the market's down 1%, all these crazy news headlines, we're going to war here, there. And then it's like, you turn it on when the market's up, oh, market's up 1%, another normal day. So I think it's like the media and the news have a big role in that. But I think because of that, people are kind of wired to always worry more about what they lost than what they've actually gained. I mean, how many people, Cody, have we worked with that, let's just say over the past 5 years since COVID, are up a pretty high percent? But then, statistically, we talk about how the market is going to have a couple of 5% downturns every single year. Yep. They really get hyper-focused on such a small period of time that statistically happens almost every year. It's like sometimes you got to take a step back, take a deep breath. That's why it's important to have a financial advisor or a coach and look at the overall picture.
That's a really good point. And I know we've been talking to our clients about it here recently. The last 2 years, 2023, 2024, were very strong years for the stock market. One thing we've been talking about is, even though we had a couple dips of around 5%, if you look back at the history of the S&P, or at least going back the last 50 years, the average decline in every single year from the peak to the trough of inside that year is 14%. So if you just look at the last 2 years, we never had a drop of more than 10%. So the volatility, sure, a 5% decline in a couple of weeks isn't going to feel the best, but that honestly is way lower volatility than what the average is.
Go back to 2022 when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, lost in the last minute of that game.
Yeah.
Just think of the emotions that they had ending the year, like knowing they were so close to win the Super Bowl. And the day after, lost the Super Bowl, went into the offseason. And just think of that like emotional grind that they had to go through to get just to the new upcoming season. But that's just kind of how, when we build out financial plans, we're building out, hey, like Sean said, that long-term perspective. But there's so many individual fundamentals that kind of go into that long-term picture. I mean, it could be the asset allocation, all these media blips on the radar. Cody just mentioned about the annual growth kind of ups and downs, but there's so many like consistencies and fundamentals that go into that long-term perspective.
Do you guys have anything in mind here recently that you had clients reaching out or you saw in the headlines that was potentially looking terrifying in the moment, but when we look back, everything was fine?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had a fair share of emails and phone calls about, most of it's been people, they see, a headline either on the internet or on TV, and they call and like, hey, they're going to tax everything. We need to get out of all, international, just something that's completely rash. And you really have to take the time and explain that, all of us have seen, some of the economists from the country's biggest banks speak. The economy is in a great overall place, just broadly speaking. And we have to kind of let them know that while there's certainly policy changes in mind, none of those things are going to happen overnight. And that the news is there to make you think that there's something happening right away. But all of those things take really intelligent discussions between world leaders and governments. So I think you really got to, again, be a coach. It's like when you have a player who just threw an interception and you got to bring them to the sideline, take the helmet off, take a deep breath. You know what I mean? Let them know they're all good. They're going to be just fine and, get back in the game.
Item that probably, or the market volatility that comes to mind was just that a couple weeks ago with NVIDIA selling off almost 20%, losing almost $600 billion in market cap in a single day. Of course, the news came out over the weekend, so people had time to look at it and everything. Looking back, I mean, NVIDIA is almost back to all-time highs now. So that volatility in the short term, as we discussed, both in stocks, investing, coaching, you can't make decisions just off of a single thing.
Yeah, I mean, Inauguration Day was on January 20th, and now we're at second weekend in February here. I mean, you guys both said it. I mean, there's been so many news items or just politically driven items that have popped up. Inflation's still hanging out there, creating a little bit of volatility. I know we had CPI, PPI come in a little hotter than wanted. Overall, I mean, we're hovering around 3%. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not that far off of their. I know they want to get down to 2%, 2.5%. I mean, it's not that far off. It just seems like some of these hanging items are just creating a little more volatility than needed.
Yep.
John, have you had anybody ask you to put in a financial plan the price of eggs recently?
I saw a lot of articles about that. If you broke open like the CPI on Wednesday and actually looked at where the inflation is coming from, I think every item was either negative or below 3% besides eggs. I think eggs was up like 16% or something like that month over month.
It's funny you said that, Cody. I was looking at a chart yesterday. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal. But when they broke open like what some of the categories are that are causing the higher inflation, auto insurance, home insurance, it's up almost 11% change. Airfare, rent, housing, education, earnings, stuff like that. Some of the items, I mean, it's been forefront in the headlines, but it's just kind of driving that higher inflation.
Yep. Do you guys have an example of a situation or like when a client calls up and where emotions are leading their decisions or their thoughts of getting out of the market or getting way more conservative or potentially the opposite, getting way more aggressive?
Yeah, I think there's some really good examples. I mean, the easy one being March and April of 2020 when everybody wanted to, get out of everything. And we finished up that year, almost 20% the market was up. And at the end of 2022, everybody had it with the market. And, it's our job to let them know that, hey, this is the long-term plan. We're going to experience these things. And by the way, if you went into cash for 2023 because you were upset with 2022, you missed out on a great year. Yep. So I think it's our job to explain, not that we know what the market's going to do, but explain how it works, what the history is. And I think there's almost a bigger risk of not being invested than there is of being invested for some folks.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of goes back to what both of you were saying earlier and going back to the financial plan and going through, okay, in this scenario, we're only planning for a 5% annual return.
Yep.
So when we have downturns like we did in 2022, where both stocks and bonds were negative, but then you have years 2023, 2024, where a balanced portfolio is up double digits and stocks up over 20%, you're back to above that 5% average. So it goes back to the plan, making sure the expectations are reasonable. The expectations for football teams or baseball teams, if you were, 3-14 the year prior, you're not going to think the next year you're going to win the Super Bowl. Like you have to make sure your expectations are reasonable.
It's just as important to understand what the client's short-term and long-term goals are. I mean, that's going to have a huge input in kind of building out the plan, asset allocation, risk tolerance, stuff like that. So it all ties back to those goals, but also the fundamentals that we talk about every day.
Yeah, I think probably the bigger risk is they're sitting in cash instead of taking the volatility that you get both in stocks and bonds. Because one of the things we hear a lot from clients or prospects is, hey, I want to get out, but I want to get back in when everything's all good. Well, when is everything all good? Like if you said that in 2022, you want to get out till inflation gets back to the Fed target, you're still not back in the market because inflation, as we just spoke about before, is still 3%.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize, I'm sure, John, you can attest this, but if you did a financial plan and just modeled everybody in cash, over the course of 30 years, it actually would be losing money. So not many financial plans would be extremely successful if you had clients losing, let's say, 1% to 2% due to inflation if they were just sitting in cash.
Sure. One of the things we do all the time is, clients will come to us and say, hey, we have a vacation coming up or we want to do home renovations or something like that. That's great. So we'll put that X amount to the side, earmarked for those goals. But then what are you going to do with the remaining amount? And like, to your point, put that money to work and we can model the difference. So yeah, absolutely.
I think it goes back to, as we said before, the plan. You're going to have different allocations for different accounts and different goals. If it's a 50-year-old that's retiring in 10, 15 years and doesn't plan on touching the IRA till RMDs, realistically, they have a 20-year time frame. Yep. So you can be more aggressive. But if they have a joint brokerage account that you're going to be tapping into the next couple of years or potentially need it for larger expenses, you're going to be more conservative because you don't want that volatility when you're going to be potentially pulling income from it.
Yeah.
Going back to Eagles earlier this season, what do you guys think made them so disciplined, even in the rough stretch where they started the season 2-2?
I heard interview with AJ Brown, and he was talking about how the Super Bowl was great. He goes, I kind of enjoyed it for one day, but he goes, I'm ready to get back to the grind.
I saw that too.
And he said he really enjoys the day-to-day, just the practicing, the going to the weight room. He said he loves the grind. And he said that's kind of what drives him. I think having individuals like that, it just creates that emotional, that discipline. And I'm sure it just, and probably Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, I think is similar. I'm sure Sirianni's similar too. But just having that mindset, and it creates that discipline. And everyone kind of just goes into that mold, and they just become a team.
I'll go with I think having the best offensive line in football probably helps. I think you can have all the skill players in the world on any side of the ball, but if you're not good up front on offense or defense, you're going to struggle. I think a good offensive line is worth its weight in gold. And just on a side note there, at the NFL awards, somebody went around asking all these NFL players, do you think the average person could gain 1 yard in the NFL on 10 carries? And a ton of responses were, well, if the Eagles were blocking for him, then yeah, I think they could. But I just think, the Eagles' offensive line, I think over time, they're going to just make so many things right.
You can you tie that back into investing too. So if you have the good financial plan with the strategy in place, you can take the volatility that you're going to see in every year with the stock market. There's going to be games where Jalen Hurts has to win the game. There's going to be games where Barkley goes for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns.
I was just going to say to wrap this up, we talk so much about the behavioral finance and the emotion that goes into it on like a day-to-day basis from what the clients see. And I think it's our job as professionals to talk to clients through kind of what's going on, educate them, but also have them pull back and say, hey, this is where we're at and kind of where we're headed. So, I mean, there is going to be volatility. There's going to be emotion involved. Instead of thinking irrationally, kind of switch that to a more rational mindset, and then also not letting emotion get the better of them. I think it's kind of our job to talk to clients through.
I was going to say my one key takeaway is there's always going to be volatility, both in sports and in stocks and in investing. Yeah. The main thing is just, as Jalen Hurts says, what's he say? Keep the main thing the main thing. So looking at the longer term, being able to handle that volatility in the short term and just continuing to talk to your advisor. And that's one of the main things too, is it's perfectly fine to talk to your advisor and say you have stress about the market or you're concerned about this. That's what your advisor is there for. You're supposed to reach out to them for them to talk you through both the upside and the downside of investing and looking for the longer term. That's why the coaches do the press conferences every single week, because they're talking and letting the fans know what they're thinking, whether they're going to change going forward, if they're going to change anything. So it's just important to go back to the basics and sticking with the plan.
Yep.
As easy as that sounds, we know it's obviously tough.
Yep. Especially
when money's involved.
I do love that quote, though. Keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah. I mean, you can tie that back to almost anything. Yeah. But especially financial planning and investing.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Go Birds.
Go Birds.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Coachable Wealth, brought to you by Morton Brown Family Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This podcast is designed for educational and informational purposes and not intended as investment advice. More information can be found at www.mortonbrownfw.com.